Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're back. We've had a break, a Frankenstein chat for a couple of weeks, but this is edition 222. And those of you watching on the video will notice that there is a guest with us, Brian Lightman. Hello, Brian.
Hello, pleased to be
Uh,
back.
Now, Brian, if you're watching on video, it does look as though he's in Ibiza or somewhere very hot, but it's just the backdrop. It is a very sunny, warm day today, but it's not. I don't think that's actually your actual backdrop, is it?
I think the sky is that blue, but I'm actually sitting inside our veranda and I can't get this background. Otherwise, you see our garden, but I can't share that at the moment.
Now, Brian, you've had an interesting life, haven't you? Professional life.
Indeed.
Do you want to just give us a little bit of a background to that for those who didn't watch you when you were on last time?
Right. Okay. Well, it always frightens me when I have to say how long that profession has been, because I think it's 45 years now.
Yeah.
A lot of different things. Obviously, starting teaching in secondary schools, teaching modern languages, becoming a head of department and head of sixth form, and then deputy head, so on. And then I had two headships, which were actually in Wales. My teaching before that was in Southeast England, and I had two headships in Wales. Got very involved in the Welsh education system there at the time when Jane Davidson was minister, which is very interesting, and got involved with ASCL, and was elected their president in Wales and then president nationally, and then became general secretaries, which coincided with 2010, which many of you will remember as the arrival of the coalition
Yeah.
government and a certain Michael Gove as Secretary of State. And I had 6 years of fun with the Secretary of ASCL. And since then, I've been doing some consultancy, but mainly volunteer work. Largely, I'm on the board of EACT Academy Trust. I'm chair of education, and also I'm a director of Schools of Tomorrow, which is an interesting organisation, really trying to shape an education for the future rather than one for the past.
Well, that's interesting because just before we were recording, one of the things we do is we chat. We the only bit that we prep in advance of the chats is just make sure we're not all going to cover the same issue. And so there was a sort of little bit of a discussion, wasn't there, Stan, about well, where's the vision at the moment? So we'll get round to that in terms of where education policy is at the moment. But yeah, anyway,
But Brian,
Stan.
if you were in the Michael Gove era, you did you technically lead the blob then?
I was certainly given honorary membership of that. Definitely, yes. Well, people described it as an interesting time. I'd say it was interesting. It was very challenging as well because you wanted to do the best for the schools, and you wanted to be listened to, and it was really difficult to achieve that.
Yeah, I met Brian during that period from 2010 to 2012 when I was working on framework development in Ofsted. So that's how we actually had contact with each other. And similarly, we were, in Ofsted, were facing sort of significant challenges in terms of what the Gove agenda was going to be, and that then resulted in sort of some significant changes at the top of the organisation. But anyway, that I suppose in a way is history, but it's an interesting history that probably needs to be unpicked in time. But anyway, Stan, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, it's parents and information about schools because I don't know if it's the same nationally, but this last fortnight, people have been allocated schools, children have been allocated schools in reception, in nurseries, etc. And I've been interested in the number of people on social media who are asking questions about the school they've been allocated. Normally, it says something like, I've been allocated this school. It's not the one we chose. In fact, it's our third option. Can anybody tell me, is it a good school? Or how does this school compare with that school? And it just struck me as I was reading these, and particularly the replies that other people made to them, that Ofsted can't be doing its job properly because there's no suggestion in any of, if you follow the trail through them, the thread, nobody says, have you looked at Ofsted? Nobody in the ones I've looked at has said, it's a good school, it's an outstanding, use those phrases. They've just talked about their own perceptions of the school, which in some cases goes back to when they were at school. So I'm presuming in 20 years there's
Yeah.
been quite a turnover of staff, etc.
I've had an interesting take on that because as a grandparent, two of my daughter, no, three actually, three of them are in the process of I use the term advisedly, choosing a school.
Yes.
Of course, it isn't choice. It never was. It's preference. And the issue is, of course, you're choosing a school now, and your child might be in that school for however many years, in which time, looking at the turnover we have in schools, the whole place will have changed, and also, Ofsted is only part of the story. I mean, my advice always to parents thinking about sending their children to the school I was in charge of was come and see it, come and see it in the day, and go into classrooms and talk to the children, talk to the staff. But what really worries me, actually, it worried me in the trust as well. We were talking about it in our education committee. What about the people who don't get into their first choice of school? Are those children already feeling a sense of failure, especially in one of those disadvantaged areas where the parents are trying their best to get their child into a school that meets the child's needs, and they're being told, no, you can't come there, and you're going to another school, which may be a perfectly good school, but it's not their choice. And I
Yes.
think that's very worrying.
Well,
Actually,
Ramesh
that
Ranganathan
happened
has
to
been.
me as a head because we were right on the outskirts of the county boundary.
Mm.
Um, we I think there's one particular year where we hadn't been full when I first took over, that it was low numbers in most classes. But at this point we were doing okay. It was going well. And I had some parents ring me up to say that they hadn't got in their school of choice, and the only school being offered to them was ours. And they
Yeah.
came thinking that this was the end of the world. And the mother cried in my office because she said, what I thought was going to happen, I
Mm.
thought this was going to be one of the worst schools I've ever seen, and I've never seen one as good. And she actually cried in the office.
Mm. Good.
And it's that thing about, one, first of all, believing you've got a choice,
Yeah.
and secondly, I'm getting a bit concerned about admit the policy for admitting pupils, because, and it's only locally, and I don't know the people concerned, but there's somebody who lives near me, actually in sight of the school from their back garden, and they haven't got a place because um, education plans, children with education plans, children that have been in care at some point, and siblings have taken up almost the entire one form entry. So
Mm.
local children aren't getting a place in that school.
Mm.
Yeah, Ramesh Ranganathan has faced this in the last couple of weeks, and he's gone public on it. So he's got three children. I think his youngest child has not got into the school where his two older children attend. What we don't know is whether Ramesh Ranganathan has moved house or whatever. But it was interesting. I think it was Becky Allen came on Radio 2 to explain sort of the circumstance and made the point that you made, that it's a preference, and actually it's, and in a way, I think there was a view that that Ramesh Ranganathan had, that there was some sort of plot against the family, or that the council were doing was applying the admission criteria, and actually he has been allocated a school. Well, I don't know where he lives. It's down south, but it's on the other side of the town, away from his brothers and his brothers. Now, the thing for me is, this is where does this, all of this sort of hinges, doesn't it, on competition? This sense that a school is better than another, as opposed to seeing the service, the education service, as a service for the community, of which everybody within the service should be trying to help each other improve each other's schools.
Yeah,
Whereas
I think, right. The people who spoke to me, though, it wasn't. I mean, we're in an area where a lot of the schools are either good or outstanding. There aren't any real difficult schools, but it's the fact that they're going to be walking past a school in the morning in order to get to the school they've been allocated.
Hmm.
That just seems to be a flaw somewhere in the process. That I mean, the issue around here is we're on the edge of Salford and Wigan. Both authorities are trying to build as many houses as they can, and nobody, it seems, is taking responsibility for building the school at
School.
the same time.
I think they're probably just hoping that the fall in the pupil numbers will actually accommodate the changes. I mean, this is happening around here where we have the old Barton Airdrome, not Barton, Woodford Airdrome, which has been now sort of knocked down, and we've got a massive housing estate, and there is one form entry primary school to accommodate hundreds of these houses, which are just built for young families, you know.
Well,
So
I was in Wakefield. I was talking about expansion like that, and apparently, building companies have to build a school if they build a certain number of houses. They have to make provision for a school to be built. So what these builders were doing were building in sequence, slightly less than the number
the number
required
they
to actually
need,
put a
yeah.
school in. And then the following phase would be another similar size. So they never got to the criteria of having to provide for a school.
Mm. Well, I mean, yeah, we can all get very personal, so it's probably best that I just duck out at this point now on
Well,
this
the
issue.
other thing is, can
Yeah.
local authorities build schools again now? Because at one point they said they were going to allow local authorities to build
Well,
schools.
yeah. Um, I suppose it's still early days, but apparently they are freeing that up, aren't they? That was one of the pledges that they made, but we've not got to a point yet where there's been a decision made about, I suppose, a new school. But Brian, what's caught your eye this week? Of which I think there's a plethora of stuff there, isn't there, that you're going to go at?
There's a very long list actually, and I mean a lot of it would lead on to what Stan's just been talking about there, because I think, one of the issues here is that we are putting children into a sort of a cycle of failure. First of all, you start with getting allocated to the wrong school, then you've got these Ofsted grades and so on. And I've been very involved in drafting one of the responses to the inspection frame proposals there, and I mean, they're simply not fit for purpose. It's the wrong model, and it's
Mm.
a model which is based, as you say, on competition and on labeling schools and going in for a snap judgment in one day. And I'm not an opposer of inspection, not at all. I did inspection myself for quite a few years, and also found the being in the process helpful. So I'm not against it, but it needs to be a collaborative thing. And I think, when you look at all these things that are going on at the moment, the accountability proposals, the rise, going into 200 schools, which may already have all kinds of support coming in
Yeah.
from their academy trust or their local authority, or whoever is going in there. So you've got this massive duplication of intervention, as if, and the message is then the whole system is failing, and you better make sure, parents, that you choose the right school, because otherwise you're going to have a problem. And that contrasts really sharply with my experience as a consultant when I go into schools, because what I see is really good schools,
Yeah.
fantastic work going on in the classroom, and much teaching that I wish had taken place in the schools I
Yeah.
was responsible for at the time, because I do think there's some really excellent teaching. And of course there are problems, but I think that's the issue. So I think, there's and I think it comes back to your point, Frank, about vision here, about what is the vision for the education system. Because we talked a lot, didn't we, when you and I first met, we were talking about the school-led system, or the system leadership and so on. And I see some good system leadership
Mm.
going on, but where does it all fit together? And what are we actually trying to achieve? And I could go on for hours about the things that we're talking about. I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, but I think there's the interesting thing for me was around the competition and
Yeah.
the use of the terms, because language matters. For people that are not involved in education, using the term stuck school
Oh God,
is
yeah.
completely unhelpful. I cannot understand who thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
Say that your school is stuck, and to actually label it in such a way,
Mm.
and actually do it in such a way that the rise teams, I'm still unclear what impact they're going to what is it they're going to do that
Yeah.
that currently
It's not already
a
being
number of
done.
multi-academy trusts already doing.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? What is the silver bullet that they're going to offer?
And are these people, I mean, I'm sure there are many very good people who are being appointed to those posts.
Yes.
Is their experience one which will help? So for example, the trust I'm in, they carry out very detailed reviews of all the schools. They know their schools really well, and they put in all kinds of support there, but they know their schools. They know the context. So it's all based around the context of those schools, rather than somebody just turning up and saying they're going to sort the problems, and taking up also a lot of time,
Yeah.
energy of leaders of those schools and trusts who are already doing everything they possibly can. So I think it's a really
What
significant point.
what happens, Brian, when you're the CEO of a trust and you have a stuck school
Mm,
and you have a strategy which is progressing?
mm,
You've obviously investing resources and support into that school. And then one of the RISE advisors comes and sort of, I'm not suggesting says, oh, you've got it all wrong, but actually begins to undermine or begins to challenge your view of where that school improvement journey should be at. Who actually resolves that? What is the position for the CEO in that arrangement?
Well, I mean, well, that might lead to yet more turnover of good people
Mm,
for all the wrong reasons. And I think it's still based on this idea that, I mean, swift action, I think was the term that the
mm.
DFE or the DCSF, as it was then, used to use. And the idea that you can go into a school that is in trouble and you can turn it around in 5 minutes. And I had lots and lots of arguments about that, because, I mean, I took over a school that was in a lot of trouble, or really, really, not doing at all
Mm.
well when I went in there. And yes, of course, we put some things in place straight away, and we made a difference in the first year, but it's superficial.
It's stabilizing.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
you stabilized it, didn't you?
that's right. We got
Yeah.
some systems in place,
Yes.
and some expectations in place, and some job descriptions and things like that. But then the real work starts, doesn't it? The real work in the that what's going on in the classroom is actually meeting the needs of those students, and that takes time. And so if a school has had a snapshot taken by Ofsted, saying that it requires improvement or needs attention, as they're now saying,
Yeah.
then that's not, it's not helpful. And while I'm on those terms, by the way, the idea that a school, secure or strong, I mean, if I was looking as an outsider at a school and they said it's secure but it's not strong, then actually strong is the only criterion you'd be aiming for as a school leader, isn't it? You'd be
Yes.
wondering, and it'll be like requires improvement again.
And
And
what saddens me is that we can see that.
mm,
We can see that actually by increasing the number of potentially weaker grades in the
yeah,
system, you're going to end up with more complaints and more challenges.
yeah,
And actually, at a point where you would have thought, actually, we want to stabilize the situation, bearing in mind where the origins of this review began, all the way back to Caversham Primary School.
absolutely.
You think actually probably would be better to reduce the number of grades, reduce the amount of inspection we're doing,
Mm,
build up the capacity, build up the expertise, confidence in the system.
mm,
But what they've done is gone to the completely other end of it,
yeah,
Even if
increase the
we
number of grades, increase the
four
number of
grades,
areas.
if they went to 4 grades, you've actually then got a met and not met.
Mm,
So you may as well go to two.
yeah. But yes, and I mean the chief inspector upset a lot of people, I think, at the ASCL conference. I wasn't there, by suggesting that people, weren't ambitious for their schools and didn't have
yeah,
any. I mean, it really,
mm,
we're beyond that, aren't we? I mean, if there are, I'm sure, if you looked really hard, you could find one or two school leaders who are not performing as they should be. But the majority of school leaders are working their socks off, and their staff, to do the best for the children. So this idea that we need to label schools and judge them like that, it's a deficit model. I don't know if you've seen Andrew Morris's book. Have you seen that?
yes, yes, I
Beyond
have. Yes.
Accountability, and I was very taken by Jim Knight's introduction to that. a lot of time for Jim Knight. He's the
Yeah.
chair of our trust. But he was comparing the accountability system in this country, which is effectively a punitive one,
Mm.
to that in other countries where it's a collaborative one. And, inspection plays a part in, helping schools to sort of to with their own assessment of where they are, and then help it, pointing to the way to improve. And that's what it should be about. It should be part of it, not just coming in like that.
Yeah.
I think we've had this before then. Wasn't there another
Yeah.
epithet with that wasn't stuck school? It was something very similar.
Yeah.
The
I can
battery
remember
isn't good enough was one.
Yes.
I can remember a colleague of mine saying we're going to adapt it as the school logo under the emblem, a school. Welcome to Exeter Primary School, a stuck school.
Yeah, I think for me the stuck nature of it is really quite useful as a sort of where Ofsted is at the moment as well, isn't it? It's stuck in a
Yeah,
model, and I
yeah,
think that I keep going back to Dame Christine Gilbert's learning review after
yeah.
Caversham, which spoke about it wasn't one of the recommendations, but within the report, she advised that there needed to be some changes in the senior leadership team at Ofsted. And in a
Mm,
way, that requires, I think, people with a bit more experience of inspection and also a broader view of what inspection can be. And I think it's
mm,
quite limited. I think in terms of when you go through the senior leadership team there, there are quite a few people who never inspected. Quite a few people who've never had senior roles in organisations.
crazy,
Quite a
crazy.
few people who've never ever looked overseas at inspection models. And I go back to somebody like a colleague of ours, Adrian Gray, who is a critic as well of current stuff. He's
Good stuff.
written stacks of stuff about inspection overseas and was involved in Ofsted's work in actually engaging with some of that. We need a bit more of that. We definitely do. We're,
Yeah, I
we're in
mean this is the problem, that I mean I said I did a lot of work on the consultation with colleagues, but the issue is, the questions that were being asked were the wrong ones there.
Yeah.
It's a cultural issue. It's a deep-seated cultural issue, and really, we've got to go back to the drawing board and change the culture there, before we talk about how you actually the mechanics of inspection.
yeah, yeah.
And I'd like to be optimistic that that's going to happen, but I think the jury is really out. But I mean, the response to this consultation, when they're all analysed, will be really, really significant. Because obviously you've got the alternative big listen as well, which
Yeah, yeah.
uh, all all of these things are pointing the same way, and so if it's ignored, there's going to be a lot of frustration out there.
I wouldn't want to be in a
Yeah,
position of the
if
chief.
it's case soon, but for the Secretary of State to say, right, we're gonna have a pause
Yeah,
as things and whatever we think, things are not right, and we need a pause, and we probably need to bring some strategist in with a different view. I'm not saying get rid of Martin Oliver. I'm saying somebody that comes in that says, let's have a different look at the way this is going to happen, and
yeah.
then start again with a
Mm,
consultation,
mm,
etc.
mm.
Because if they try and push this through, I just cannot see it doing anything but
Yeah.
causing chaos in
If you
schools.
can't take the majority of the profession with you on it, you are going to sit on a problem that will eventually, erode confidence in the process, I think. So,
Mm.
yeah, well, not trying to be too negative, but what's caught my eye this week was funding. I'm the chair
Yeah,
of a finance and resources committee of a small trust in East Manchester, and we were looking at next year's budget, trying to set that out for in the academy world. These start in September, so we're doing our planning now. And looking at the bottom line, it looks as though we've got about a 1.5% overall increase in central funding, of which we have to fund. We probably will have to fund teachers' pay rises this year out of that. And unless there is something, if they're coming at 4%, unless there is a 2.5% addition to our staffing costs, we're not going to be able to, well, we will be able to fund it, but we'll be funding it from reserves, and that's not sustainable in the long term. So, I mean, but wanting to be a bit more positive, there was some good news, I think, on teacher recruitment figures in the last few days to suggest that in some areas that they look as though that they're perhaps turning, and I want to be positive about that. That is a good position. And also there was some news that the target for drama teachers is significantly stepped up as well, which also signifies perhaps a shift in where the curriculum review might be heading, in terms of what that might be a clue as to where that might, where the focus might come in the next year or so. So we might be seeing the shift away from STEM a little bit and more into a broader experience for young people, particularly at secondary school, where I think, I have a granddaughter who attends a, outstanding local school, but they have one food tech room for 1,000 children. So she's had one half term of food tech, and she's now nearly completed year 8. That is simply not a good education. We're producing young people who, unless the family do it, are unable to cook for themselves. You know what I mean? It's just not good enough. And that's extended into other areas of design technology, the arts as well,
Yeah.
I think it sort of
Having
goes
said that, Frank, I never did food technology. I'm old enough to know that the boys did woodwork or metalwork, the girls did food technology, or domestic science, as it was known.
yes.
Domestic science, what a phrase!
Again, but the point is for some of the children in the poorest families, not all of them by any means, because there are some fantastic parenting going on there, some fantastic, sort of creative solutions to sort of way beyond me, in terms of what you can do with a small amount of money to create a healthy meal. But for some of those poorest children, they do need that sort of support. You know,
I share your optimism about the sort of the general direction of giving those things greater weight within the curriculum. And I've got to say, my experience when DT was a subject that was important within the curriculum, I saw some absolutely fantastic practice. And sometimes for those students who may not have excelled in a sort of very traditional range of academic subjects, and they went on to do A levels and degrees and things in engineering and so on. Absolutely fantastic. But also the food side of it, I really liked that approach of designing a menu that meets certain dietary needs and all those sorts of things, and then preparing them. And the kids loved it.
yeah,
And I really hope we can rescue it and find people to teach those subjects, because it is incredibly difficult to recruit people into that, and we all know if we can get the best teachers in, then half the battle is won. But I mean, the other thing to say on your funding point is that certainly in my recent experience going into schools, talking to people about the budget plans, they are actually making some very hard decisions about increasing class size, taking certain options out of the curriculum.
yeah.
Again, will narrow it, and they really don't want to do it because they know it's not the right things, but the fear, I think, is that if we don't get the funding right, then we'll end up narrowing the curriculum again, when it is very clear that Bridget Phillips and other policymakers do recognise the need to develop them. I think the other positive on the curriculum, by the way, is the work on oracy, the emphasis
Yeah, I
on,
was going to say that.
and obviously I know Jeff well,
Yeah.
Barton led that brilliantly, but it's there's also Voice 21 and other people who have been banging on about this, and where I see children really been having those oracy skills developed, you see fantastic learning going on, because you're not getting the one word and replies and the sort of the grunt, as reply. You're getting that, they're able to make statements and justify them and explain them. And then their understanding is deeper, and you don't need to be an expert in cognitive science to recognize that this is really, really important. And it isn't actually going to cost megabucks to build that into the curriculum, into teaching and learning.
I would like to see a little bit of that creeping more into this examination system. I think we've lost a lot of that because, and I suppose it's in a way how we transition to something else is that we definitely have, in my time, emphasized examinations increasingly as if it's the be all and end all. And we have a system where a third of the children, if we have a grade, a pass grade, fail. But many of those children require oracy skills. And in a way, the teachers or the teaching of examinations, if it was to embrace a bit more of that, I think would probably draw out
Yeah.
sort of talent that currently gets missed.
And yeah, I mean, one of the things that does depress me, I must say, when I go into lessons, is that a lot in Key Stage 4, particularly, that the topic of the lesson today is how to answer question 3 of paper 2, whatever, in the GCSE,
Yes.
rather than an aspect of that subject that I'm going to bring to life with my
Yeah.
inspiring teaching, and that is so sad. That's where, exams have a part to play, but that it is not the be all and end all. And there are ways of bringing in, uh, I think, an aspect of coursework. Again, that was a low trust model. We can't trust teachers to mark their work. Absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
In other countries, teachers are professionals and an assessment is one of the higher order skills they are taught at degree and postgraduate level. So they know how to assess students.
Well,
At
I'm gonna.
primary, the curriculum narrows to the point of if it's tested in SATs by year 6, that's what's important.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, Frank, of subjects, apart from examinations, we also weigh subjects with different importance.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
if you've got music
Yeah.
as a GCSE, that doesn't count compared to, say, I don't know, maths or science or one of the sciences. Music's just
I can't stand the double weighting of English and maths
yeah.
in the accountability framework when actually English and maths are parts of other subjects as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just absolutely ridiculous that we double count those. But just so we can bring it to a close. Again, I've mentioned this a few times in the past, but it links in with Brian's Welsh sort of work in schools. In that my brother, who was an HMI for Estin, when he came on here, when we asked the question, what was one thing he would change, was that he always said we'd go back to teacher assessed coursework for GCSE,
Yeah.
and because that encouraged collaboration, encouraged the sharing of materials and outcomes across schools locally. And of course, it was, as he said, high stakes. So, if you couldn't sustain the grades that you've awarded, it was going to affect every single grade that you'd allocated in your school. So it was really high stakes stuff. It wasn't an easy pushover. So, I'd like to see a lot more of that as part of this lack of, to reduce the impact of competition as well. It's sort of like, it's a bit more of the sharing and helping of each other, to be honest.
Of course, it would help the recruitment and retention issue because people go into teaching to be professionals and they don't want to just be told to comply with externally implied edicts all the time. They want to actually own the curriculum. And I think the other point is that, people like me of a certain age are the last people who know best
Yeah.
about how to inspire young people, whereas we've got some younger people coming into the profession who are absolutely fantastic at that, and can really relate to the children in the right way. And that's what we need. We need to be giving those people the opportunity to play a big part in the system and but also to learn the nuts and bolts of teaching,
Yeah.
not just move on after 2 years or whatever and come out of the classroom. We need people to go in there as a profession.
And give them some more autonomy in
Yeah.
the classroom. I just think, I know Frank and I many years ago we had a different of a view about how autonomous a teacher should be. And I was at one end where saying the teacher should be completely autonomous. It's their class, their curriculum, blah blah blah. Frank was, I wouldn't say you were far on the opposite side, but you were
No.
definitely not on the same side. But I think we've got to a point now where I can remember as a young teacher somebody telling me a tale about France and their national curriculum,
Yeah, well,
saying, it's Thursday, so you should be on page 7 of this text, etc. And I always thought, well, we'll never get to there. But I'm not sure we're not still heading in that direction.
I think the other point there is that I remember there was a lovely term. I did a sort of SWOT analysis when I first started as a head, and one of the things one of the governors wrote on there was about charismatic renegades. Gosh,
I like that
and,
phrase.
yeah, and he felt very strongly about these charismatic renegades, but having thought about a couple of them, I mean, one or two of them were, off the wall, okay, but there were people who taught in a different way, whose relationships were in a different
Mm,
way, and who were quite charismatic, and they carried children with them.
Mm.
And if I'd been saying, no, you must teach like this, they used to drive me mad sometimes and not follow policies.
yes.
Actually, they were able to motivate children who other teachers couldn't motivate and to get really good achievements from them, and I think we risk, if you take away too much autonomy in the classroom, then you risk stifling a teacher's creativity and skill.
Yeah.
And we
Um,
don't learn after that, do we?
No.
Because it's about learning and finding people who do things differently but successfully, and analysing that and saying, how does that work?
Mm,
And
mm.
if we don't encourage that, we're
Yeah.
stuck
well,
where we are now.
it's interesting that there's been a bit of conversation this week about the over reliance of the inspector calls text at
Yes,
GCSE
that's all.
English.
Yeah.
I
Mm.
mean, this plays into that, doesn't it, really? That, you're a new teacher coming in. Well, here's your set text.
Yeah.
This, because why is it the set text? Well, it's because we've done it for a long time. We've got all the materials for it. We've even got the lesson plans for them. We've even got the slides for them.
Yeah.
But you come in as a teacher, as a young teacher, thinking, or new teacher, thinking, but actually, that bored me to, I was bored to tears doing that when I was studying.
Yeah.
But I've got this great new book,
Yeah.
that I'm excited about.
And
That.
I can think of one English department that I went into quite a few times, and what they did was that the faculty leader for the subject leader for that subject, with the team, they chose a whole range of books that the teachers and bought sets of those books, so that the teachers didn't have to all study the same book at the same time, but obviously the issues that were being assessed and the sort of skills and knowledge that were being developed were aligned, but it meant that teachers could be really working on a book that interested them, and I mean, again, I taught German. I taught German A level when literature was a big part of that A level, and I chose the books I taught because they were the ones that I thought would motivate the children and had something that was interesting. And there were other books that I wouldn't have touched with a barge pole because I think they would have been, I would have been bored stiff teaching them, and that would have rubbed off on the students.
Yeah. Well, it's been a fascinating chat. It's nearly 40 minutes. It's amazing how quickly it runs past. So, thank you again, Brian, for joining us, and
Yeah,
thank
thanks,
you,
Brian.
yeah, and thank you everybody for watching and listening. And we'll be back. We've got a little run now, 3 or 4 weeks before we get to the whip break. So, but thank you, Brian, and
Okay.
all being well, we'll see you all next week. Take care, everyone. Bye
Thanks.
bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye bye.